She's ready.
All right.
Give me the light.
All right. Looks like we're good to go. So.
Okay. Hi, my name is Gwen Wyckoff. I lived with Frank Ozak for 17 years. What I'm going to tell you is what he told me. I'm not a member of his family, and Jennifer Ozak will be talking after me. Whether or not she's on video, I have no idea. It's up to her.
No swaying.
Oh, I'm swaying. So please, if you're watching this and I start to sway, just shut your eyes. The title of my eulogy here is From Darkness to Light. Frank Ozak was absolutely fearless. He was born into hell. And his mother struggled to support the family by selling Avon and other things, and I think Jennifer probably has much more details on this. But his father was quite well known by the FBI. He was the third most wanted thief on the FBI wanted list. He not only was an incredible thief, he was a mean drunk. And the children would run from him when he came home. Frank was the object of some of the brutality. I tell you this about Frank because it's so important to understand why he got into the common law trust business, which is about turning the family into a business, and it's about putting the focus on the children and the future. So when you understand where he came from, you can understand his joy and his desire and his needs. Also in Frank's family, he came from mafia background, and he was invited to join the mafia when he was quite young. I think it was before he was 12, but maybe it was when he was a teenager. Anyhow, he had the good sense all on his own to say no. At the age of 12, he decided his family was crazy, and he found out that you could he found out he could get some sense and reason by reading astrology. And it's probably one of the things that kept him sane. In his his father, being a thief, used to use him when he was a child to crawl into windows and open doors on the inside of the house. So he was, by nature, a thief. And at one time, this is much later in his life when he wasn't a thief, my father told me to go to the home because he wanted to get rid of everything. He was preparing himself to die. And he said, take anything you want. And so Frank came with me, and he taught me how to pilfer. That means how to go through everything and take things. Believe me, Frank was a professional thief. He knew how to go through everything and take everything. In this particular case, of course, it was with my father's blessing. But I was amazed. I would have taken like 5 things. He had the car piled high with everything. Don't you want this? Don't you want that? Don't you need this? I was really shocked. But that was kind of an interesting experience, seeing him in thief action. Well, what happened is when he was a teenager, he got caught, I suppose as a thief, and he was sent to juvenile detention, and he was there for over a year. And in juvenile detention, they taught him how to be a electrician. So he had a great deal of mentoring and training while he was there. And that helped him considerably. But he decided in that time frame when he was in juvenile detention that he was absolutely never, ever going to be a thief again. He hated thieves and he hated liars. When he got out of juvenile detention, he took a bus to his mother's house, and he slept 18 hours. And sometime after that, he organized his friends, or he got a car or something, and he figured out how to leave Cleveland. He figured out that Cleveland was going to be his death. He was either going to be murdered when he was young, or he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison. So he left, and he left with some of his friends. And he spent the next 5 years traveling the United States, being a apprentice or being he just took any job he could. He had 40 jobs in 5 years. Some of those jobs were hanging traffic lights. Every time you see one of those traffic lights, think of Frank. He pumped gas. He climbed telephone poles in the dead of winter and reset the high voltage electric wires. He was an apprenticed plumber, a machinist, a car mechanic. But one of the odd things that he did is he was a bouncer in a gay bar. And for this we thank his father, who taught him how to street fight when he was very young. So Frank had some very interesting tactics. He actually showed me a couple of them, told me a couple of them. It was about always going for the legs. But in that regard, he had a good mentor in his father because it helped him survive. He eventually found himself in California, and he arrived broke with a car that hardly worked. And somehow, and I don't have all the details, and I might have them mixed up, but Frank was utterly, totally fearless, and he could talk his way in and out of anything. So he talked the owner of a trailer into allowing him to stay for 2 weeks to allow himself to get a job, because behind the trailer was a junkyard. And Frank was very knowledgeable in how to turn junk into...
antiquing.
What?
It's called antiquing.
Antiquing. He called it antiquing, so he could take the copper wire and make money out of it, and so on and so forth. So looking for a job, and with his vast experience, because he could do anything, he was also a machinist, and so he could make anything out of metal. He had so much knowledge, it was profound. So he started in the airline industry. They hired him in some oddball situation. I don't remember what he was supposed to be doing, but he became a purchasing agent. Then he became a manager. And the stories he told me were so funny, because these people in the airline industry would come up with some sort of need for an oddball joint or an oddball piece of equipment to do the strangest thing. These things were all over my head. But he could actually sit down, put it on paper, figure it out, give it to the engineers. Now you have to understand, the engineers were all like PhDs. They had these enormous educations. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Frank only had a 9th grade education.
I never knew that. I had to interrogate my father about that, and it floored me.
Yeah, he only had,
PhD level at least.
he was a brilliant person when it came to survival and figuring things out, and that was where, in the common law trust business, he and I just meshed. Okay. Because we actually recreated the common law trust from nothing, and that was his talent.
So he never let his schooling get in the way of his education.
No, he never let his education get in the way. Okay. Although he was an astrologer, and we eventually met here in California in an astrology meeting, I didn't like him at all. I thought he was horrible. In fact, when I got near him, the hackles in the back of my neck stood up. That's how much I liked Frank. But later, about a year later, we met at a party, and he was on one side of the room, I was on the other side of the room. We were both talking about state citizenship with Richard McDonald. We were both kind of like preaching to the people around us. So eventually, in the meeting, we, came in the middle and decided we were talking about the same thing, knew the same thing. So that's where our relationship started, and that was probably in 1992, 91, 92. And I decided, I had some bucks at that time, and I decided the bucks were not making as much money for me as they should make, and I thought, well, I should make myself happy. I should do what I really want to do. So I started Perceptions magazine, and Frank was right there with me, because he was all about setting people free and telling the truth about the government, and that's what that magazine was about. And from there, from state citizenship to the magazine, we got involved in what's called the Common Law Trust. And in that particular time frame, it was mostly used by the IRS to capture people and take their money. And so we researched it and we redesigned it and we found out all kinds of truth about it. And now we found out, there's this thing that the rich use the Common Law Trust. Well, we had to figure out how they did that and why they did that and how they built their generation after generation. So he was as much a research fiend as I was, and we eventually we're comparing notes and comparing our details, and we redesigned and reformatted the entire Common Law Trust as it is today in The Art of Passing the Buck, the two books that we fought the IRS and the DOJ about, and we got them published. The Common Law Trust is about resetting the family. Okay, now that you hear me say resetting the family, you really get it with Frank, don't you? He had a family that if they had known how to set up their family, if they had known the value of thinking about the third generation, if they had had any training at all about the power of the family and how to build the assets for the family, he would have been so happy to give that information to them. He would not have been born in darkness, but he definitely did find the light. Okay, that's all I got. If you got any questions, yes?
One more thing. What happened when you get an order for a book?
Oh, when an order for a book came in, Frank was like a little puppy waggling his tail.
The first one?
Yeah, volume 1, because it was his joy to share the information, to make his family stronger and better in all ways. Anything else?
Tell me about the scope of his family outside of his real family.
Okay, Jennifer wants to know the scope of his family outside of his real family. Well, Heidi is one of them. Howard is another one. Kathy Ann is very big. These are people who have supported him and helped him in ways that you can't imagine. Kathy Ann, I'll tell you, we have stuff in trust and nothing belongs to anything and, doesn't belong to you. But he had the use of a very fancy car, and I detested the car. I didn't want to have anything to do with it because it was way over my head. I didn't want to take care of it. I didn't want to drive it. And Kathy Ann was the trustee on that car. So when the disaster happened with Frank, after the 5 paramedics came and took him away, I called up Kathy. I said, "Get the car. Get it. I can't deal with it." 24 hours she was with us both, she's helping us. And Heidi has been tremendous in going back and forth to the nursing home. And Howard is my babysitter through this time. He came immediately. I said, "I can't make it." That's it. I can't take it. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well done. Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to?
I would like to say something. I'm not the right person to end it, so I hope somebody else will
Howard.
help. But I have something to say.
Good for you, Johnny.
All right. Well, I'm pretty much of an outside the core group, but I had the privilege and honor of being around with Frank and Gwen for about a year, involved in the activities. And the way I saw Frank, he was a source of power and confidence. And it was something to be noticed. And so, I feel like I neglected them by not keeping in touch over the last 6-8 years or whatever it's been. But that's how I saw Frank. He was a very powerful being, and so he came and he left, and we'll probably never know the full effect he had on this planet here with the beings that are trying to do better. You know, and he was part of that, helping people, you know, remember who they are, you know, and what they can do. That's about it.
Thank you. It's more important this be done for posterity. And we have a large distractive, right? You can learn a lot about a person from their screensaver. Frank had a fascinating screensaver on his computer which lasted only a little bit longer than he did. He had some interesting things like a marijuana leaf, a very tasteful Vargas-style pinup, some Salvador Dali type of impressionistic billiard accoutrements, a billiard ball set, a pool table cutaway, and he also had some technology. He had an armored personnel character who they didn't recognize. He had what was clearly a cutaway of a AK-47, and he had an absolutely beautiful cutaway of a Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighter. So let's look at Frank Ozak as innovator and technologist. Two aspects. First of all, in the aviation industry, and second, in the irrevocable common law trust. Frank worked for Pacific Aeromotive for many years. When he left Pacific Aeromotive, it took not one, not two, not three, but 5 people to replace him. I think at Charles Arthur it will take not one, not two, not three, but half a dozen people to fill his very large shoes. So let's look at 2 aspects of the technology. Actually, one aspect will be the hard technology, and the other will be the common law trust. Frank shared an interest with myself in what is called by Nikola Tesla free energy. As I go through his papers, I see this solar thing, that wind generator, that wind generator. But there are 2 that are of interest to me, and I think Frank, if he were here, would ask me to share them with you, so I shall. These are not pie-in-the-sky things like Leonardo Rossi and or Andrea Rossi and his Leonardo Corporation and his ECAT, quote, low-energy nuclear reaction, for which there are no independent engineering studies. Or Meran Tavoki Kesh of the Keshi Foundation, where he claims he'll have a spaceship real soon now. But there are 2 that have independent engineering reports. The first is called Blacklight Power, blacklightpower.com, out of New Jersey, just east of Princeton. Their leading light is a fellow named Randall C., R-A-N-D-E-L-L-C, Mills, M-I-L-L-S, ran into his friends. He is a medical doctor turned inventor. And he has not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 independent engineering reports. You can also get more information at PESWiki, P-E-S-W-I-K.com, and the person behind that is Sterling D. Allen, A-L-L-A-N. He's out of Utah. Now, Blacklight Power has received some coverage, but mostly it has been, there's nothing behind that curtain. Turn your attention to unimportant things like celebrity gossip and sports. And quite frankly, the American public is such a bunch of simpletons that they fall for that bunch of baloney. 5 different engineering reports. The second is a company out of Menlo Park, California. They are called Solar Hydrogen Trends. Now, they are best covered on the PESWiki.com website. They have 1 engineering report, but I actually went so far as to call the report because the report came out of a company in Anaheim, and they said, I know that street, Lewis Street. I grew up 3 or 4 miles from there. And I called, and yes, it's a real company. Don't know if the report's real, but it's a real company. So I would urge you to look into that thing if it resonates with you at all, either black light power or solar hydrogen trends. However, Frank's most important contribution, and for which he wrote the glossary of The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1, is his tireless, relentless work in the irrevocable common law family trust. Even in his hospice, Frank was handing out business cards, showing the book, handing out brochures to anybody that would pass by.
Passing bucks and does.
Passing bucks, yes, passing bucks. So I'd urge you, if you have not gone to the website, go to passingbucks.com. You will see the beautiful, intelligent Gwen Wyckoff and the wolf himself, Frank Ozak, holding court and being interviewed by people from all over this planet. Ben Lowry performed a presentation at the Carl Hess Club, which used to meet in this very room years ago. In fact, I think Gwen and Frank talked to this club when they were in that club when they were in this very room many moons ago. Paul has the recording. And so you can hear him wax poetic about the irrevocable common law trust. A, go to the website. B, if you have not acquired The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 especially, or perhaps The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 2, get a copy. If you have a copy, read it. So that is Frank Ozak, Frank C. Ozak, technologist. A man of many tools as we go through his stuff. Tool after tool after tool.
No monkey wrenches, though.
No monkey wrenches. But a man who had tools and knew how to use them wisely, because there's an old saying, or an old adage, when you dishonor the tool, you dishonor the tool and yourself. And Frank Ozak, above all else, even though he was a wolf, was a gentleman of great honor.
Anybody else wants to talk? Are you going to talk?
She looks like she is.
Are you going to be on camera?
I guess.
All right, you're going to be on camera.
Right on, Coffee.
I met Frank in 1995, and I met Gwen at that same time. I was a broken, very broken person. And between Gwen and Frank, they gave me a new life. They helped me get back on my feet. Gwen was the driver behind that. Gwen gave me a job, and Frank supported her all 100%. He and she, when they started on the trust business, they talked to me about trust, and I was so broken, there was no way I could deal with it. And eventually they just kept on and kept on and kept on and said, okay, you need to be a trustee, because being a trustee is so important. It's one of the very basic building blocks of the trust industry, the trust plans. You have to be 100% trustworthy. And that's what Frank was. As Gwen says, he was the warrior. He would stand up for what he knew was right. And by God, you better do what was right or you'd be in big trouble. There was no forgiveness for liars and thieves. You had to be trustworthy, and I felt honored, I mean truly honored, that he would count me as a trustee. And I intend to be that as long as I'm capable. And I loved him. I got to talk to him on Friday before he left. He called me. I was on my way to Mesa to compete in chorus. He called me and he said, I want you to be sure that the car uses synthetic oil.
McDonald's, right?
And I said, yes, I know it uses, and that's what we put in it. We put in synthetic oil. And he said, okay, I wanted to be sure. And I told him, I said, I love you, Frank. And he said, I love you. And that was the last I heard from Frank.